Russo-Ukrainian War continues. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu announced on April 22 that Russian troops would begin pulling back from positions close to the Ukrainian border and returning to their bases. If fully implemented, this withdrawal will bring the curtain down on weeks of heightened tensions caused by a massive Russian military buildup close to Ukraine that had sparked fears of a possible major escalation in the simmering 7-year conflict between the two countries. Amid the justifiable sense of relief in Kyiv and other European capitals, it is critical to underline that Vladimir Putin's campaign of aggression against Ukraine remains far from over. While the potential catastrophe of a full-scale Russian spring offensive has been avoided, the threat of a dramatic escalation remains very real. Meanwhile, Crimea and large swaths of eastern Ukraine's Donbas region are still under Russian occupation, and the death toll continues to climb in a conflict that has already claimed more than 14,000 Ukrainian lives. It remains to be seen whether Russia's announced withdrawal will apply to the entire military buildup in regions bordering Ukraine. Speaking in Brussels earlier this week, EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell stated that Russia had deployed over 100,000 troops to the Ukrainian border, along with a vast array of military hardware. This tallies with similar assessments shared by the US and Ukraine. In loosely monitoring the situation to determine whether the Kremlin intends to keep elements of its recently deployed the coming weeks, the international community will be courses in place on a more open-ended basis. They will also be watching to see if Moscow attempts to rotate any troops and equipment surreptitiously into Russian-occupied eastern Ukraine. At this stage, the crisis appears to have brought a number of positives for Ukraine. On the domestic front, President Zelensky rose to the occasion and enjoyed some of his most statesman-like moments since winning the presidency 2 years ago. He demonstrated personal courage by visiting the front lines, secured high-profile meetings with international leaders including Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and French President Emmanuel Macron, communicated a reassuring, "Don't panic" message to the international media, and delivered a strikingly presidential address to the Ukrainian nation which included some memorable one-liners directed at Vladimir Putin. "It is impossible to bring peace on a tank," he informed the Russian dictator. The international response to Russia's saber-rattling was also somewhat encouraging from Ukraine's point of view. America led the way with a flurry of calls to Kyiv and Moscow that served to communicate Washington's support for Ukrainian sovereignty and readiness to impose costs on the Kremlin. A broad coalition of Western nations also voiced their backing for Ukraine while expressing alarm over Russia's actions. Many believe Russia's military buildup was at least partially motivated by a desire to test the strength of the international community's ongoing commitment to Ukraine. If this was indeed the case, then the response has been emphatic. As Ukrainian parliamentarian Oleksiy Goncharenko noted this week, Putin has received a very clear signal that the international community is on Ukraine's side. Despite these welcome developments, Ukraine remains in a perilous security predicament. The crisis did not provoke any significant increases in direct Western military support, while Ukraine's increasingly direct and vocal calls for greater progress towards NATO membership were discreetly ignored. As a result, few in Kyiv are under any illusions regarding the limitations of international support. Instead, there is recognition that while Ukraine can expect to receive much-needed weapons and access to important intelligence in the event of an escalation, the country remains ultimately alone as it faces the Russian colossus. The recent spike in geopolitical tensions has also allowed Russia to achieve a number of strategic objectives. Putin was able to flex his military muscles on the global stage and secured a flattering summit invitation from Joe Biden that strengthened Russia's fading claims to superpower status. Perhaps most importantly, the Kremlin also demonstrated its ability to dial up or de-escalate its hybrid war against Ukraine at will. The message to Kyiv and Ukraine's Western partners could hardly have been clearer. Russia has not ruled out a military solution to the conflict and may yet resort to force if the necessary concessions are not forthcoming. The international community must now decide how much longer it will allow itself to be intimidated by the Kremlin in this manner. Putin may have ordered his reinforcements to withdraw for the time being, but at present there is nothing to stop him repeating these scare tactics whenever necessary.
Fire in the hole, fire in the hole, fire in the hole! There's a hit.
Contact!